Cassandra, thanks for joining here. First, real quick, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit about your background and why you are appropriate to talk about experimentation program work and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. I'm Cassandra. Obviously, I lead the experimentation and analysis team at Shopify. So we work as a center of excellence to drive a lot of experimentation and data-informed decision-making, but also to really enable other teams and help them do the same thing a lot more easily and with a lot more rigor.
You recently were a judge for Ton Westland's awesome experimentation culture awards, and so you got the privilege, I would say, to audit a lot of programs. Yeah. And so my first question: what are some of the rituals and artifacts? And I actually grabbed this from the company-wide award that Farfetch won, and they presented as these rituals and artifacts. What are some of the commonalities that you see successfully used across all the programs that you got to audit?
Yeah, that was actually I think best part of that is getting to see all of that. And a lot of commonalities come down to making sure that, and I know we'll touch on this later, but making sure that people get the information and the insights and that those get spread out. I definitely see a lot of common threads around normalizing failure, and failure isn't a failure. The point of this is to learn, and learning what doesn't work. Subtractive learning is just as valuable as what does work. And frankly, if you're not getting some failures, you're probably not taking big enough swings and big enough risks and really not getting the most out of your program. And so culturally, I think that's something that comes up often, and people have different ways of doing that. My team has a show and tell where we basically intentionally show early work before it's done, before it's polished, when we might be embarrassed to show it, to get people looking at it, giving feedback, giving ideas earlier. And that's the way that we normalize everything. Everything doesn't need to be perfect and polished all the time. And then we gladly share out experiments that failed. Those are super interesting. And then I think rituals to really make sure that the quality is there. And the show and tell does that for us a lot as well. But experimentation in particular it's valuable because it's so rigorous. And so if it's not done right, then it's not really having the impact that it's meant to have. And there's just so many kind of pitfalls and things that can go wrong, where you can really trick yourself into thinking you've learned something in a really trustworthy way when you have it. And so I think making sure that is really trustworthy is really important too. And that often comes from peer review or processes of approval, having those guardrails, which I think we'll get to in a bit. I think those are really important as well.
I want to push around the show and tell specifically, because that's around safety and enablement, but it's not necessarily around motivation. And what I mean by that, so it's almost the flip side. Safety encourages it from the bottom up, but from the top down, motivation around this is our goal and here's the path to get there. Those two components I look at those as two big ingredients to get motivation. So maybe around the show and tell around that, but what are some of the tricks that help you define that clear path? Maybe some of those guardrails that you speak to of, okay, we're safe to do, but you also need the clear path. Otherwise you're not going to be as motivated. So can you speak to that side of the coin, so to speak?
Yeah, I think so. For us, because we're the center of excellence, we work really closely with teams that tend to have really strong goals. So as a company, we have really strong goals. And for us as a team, we prioritize based off of ultimately how much is it going to impact the bottom line? How close is this work to the metrics that matter? And then how big is the scope of the opportunity? Because you could be working on something that's maybe very close to profit or something like that, but it's for a tiny audience. How close is it to those key metrics? how big is the opportunity? And then for us as a team, can we have incremental impact? So this project might be really, really impactful on its own, but if we're not actually going to contribute anything to that project, then we don't need to necessarily get ourselves involved. We could focus elsewhere. And so that's how we really think about driving impact. But since we get to work with these teams across different channels, different parts of the funnel, all over the business, we really have to adopt their goals, and their KPIs become our goals and our KPIs while we're working with them. And it's really important to remember that. And basically, we want to help those teams more be successful. Ultimately, if they're successful, then we're successful. And that means making sure that they are validating good hypotheses so that they can really move the needle on the things that matter, making sure that we're getting them really trustworthy results so that they can accurately forecast off of that and they don't oversell what they can deliver over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it would be hard to do if your company doesn't have clear goals. But for us, I think they're exogenous to our team. They're part of the bigger company mission.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. So third question here, all on like how you're using your center of excellence, especially. I'm curious on breaking across team silos. So I find communications work pretty well to manage up. That's pretty straightforward. We're all used to reports and readouts and things like that. But how are you getting maximum learnings and engagement, and then with communication pieces to go laterally, right? That's what I find a huge struggle for a ton of organizations, to break the silos laterally.
Yeah, so I think one thing that was important for me to start was like to accept that you can't tell everyone everything all the time, because I think what we want to do is for everyone to know everything, but it just becomes a flood of information and people don't pay attention to everything. If we're just reporting out on dozens of learnings every week, people are going to skim it. They're not going to open the email, or they're going to miss the things that really matter to them. So we have to be marketers a little bit. One key component of our program is we have the experiment database. So we're capturing every experiment we run, and we're capturing some key kind of information about that experiment, where the regions impacted, the audiences, the surfaces, sometimes the intervention type. And that makes it searchable. That makes it so it can be filtered based on specific criteria. So there's basically 3 ways we use that. One is when the experiment happens, we basically try to market it. We're like, who's the audience? What's interesting about it? How do we reach those people? And that could be jumping into some specific Slack channels, that could be debriefing some specific teams, using our newsletter, using other teams' newsletters. So we really think about what's the distribution plan for these learnings, and then try and spread them to the right people. Again, not telling everyone about 15 experiments every day or something like that, because again, no one would care. And then the second way that we use that archive is once we've gotten those initial learnings and made decisions based on them, it's not over. We'll have often people will ask questions, and this is often lateral. This is not coming from top down. It's teams trying to build campaigns, trying to plan initiatives, wondering, hey, have we tried this? Do we know about that? How does this work? And a lot of times we can go back and look up and say, yeah, I've got something for you. Like, we've answered that question. And the third way is actually trying to go back and get more learnings. So we might go back and say, we really want to understand all experiment results degrade. We've run a lot of experiments that look at retention. We really want to start to understand how retention lifts degrade over time and really improve our model for kind of forecasting out the impact of a lift on retention. And so let's go back and pull all of those experiments and do some archive analysis to see what kind of model we can build off of that. So we keep recycling the learnings in a lot of ways as well. And that means that they keep getting shared out. The other thing that's less about the communication that I think really helps is to have kind of your ambassadors, your emissaries in other teams. So there's often the people who are
change makers.
Yeah, it's not their job. It's my job. I have to work on this stuff. I get to work on this stuff, but they might have a different job, but they're really interested in it. It's helping them do their job better. And so they become almost like a surrogate member of the team, and leveraging those people. It's like guest posting or something. You get access to their audience through them, and making sure that those people are in the fold. Then they go out and they take a lot of this stuff with them into those teams, because we can't be everywhere.
Yeah. All really good information on test learnings, but on the program side of things, Center of Excellence, I'm playing with the idea on what it might look like to have these modular internal, like Center of Excellence, like mini workshops, like stats on running tests on how our system works, or how the prioritization and the resourcing. Where are you spending your calories? Should you spend your calories?
Yeah.
Do y'all use any mechanisms of these mini workshops within the program to like spread the knowledge of how things work in the program on side?
Yeah. So because we look across such a broad spectrum, it's not really a one size fits all thing. So we end up having a mix of things. We leverage those people that we know we're going to work with us often, and so we really educate them and train them up maybe on more parts of the process than others. And we've got a lot of playbooks and frameworks and things like that. So those can be tools for people to self-serve, or tools for people who are going to engage with this kind of work more often to get more of an intuitive understanding. Even for just developing the experimental design, we've got a template we've built to do all the pre-analysis and figure out the sample size and how that's going to change over time, and plan the experiment length, or plan, how many geos you're going to need, or whatever the design requires. So it's a lot of templates, streamlined workflows. We've got like a decision tree that anyone can use to figure out for themselves if they're even on the right path for running an A/B test. Just a few simple questions that will help you rule out, probably an A/B test isn't going to help you here. Let's talk about some other tools that you can use to get some insights, and you might have to just ship it and go from there. So yeah, it's a whole mix. And then we do a lot of mini workshops. Chanel on my team, who used to be at CXL, has done like a kind of a guided heuristic analysis workshop where she leads the group through doing heuristic analysis. Look, I think our goal right now is really to remove ourselves as a bottleneck as often as possible, which is, I think, going to be a never-ending journey, because as soon as we can say, you know what, we don't really need to do this anymore, people are able to self-serve, a tool does it now, whatever the case may be, then we like move on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing.
It's a healthy way to look at things. You've got the process side of things, or technical problems, and then you've got the creative side of things, or adaptive problems. And we build process to theoretically support creativity, but oftentimes it can squash it. And that's what happens in a lot of big organizations. And like, you just hit red tape, or you hit walls of process, and it doesn't support the creativity.